We finished up last time talking about the divisions of the efferent division of the peripheral nervous system. We had the somatic nervous system, which is in charge of, deals with the skeletal muscles and only skeletal muscles. So if there's going to be a signal sent to your stomach, it's not going to be coming from the somatic nervous system. Then we have the autonomic nervous system. Impulses sent from the central nervous system to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. So pretty much the autonomic nervous system is going to be in charge of anything that's not a skeletal muscle. This is sometimes referred to as the involuntary nervous system. Now, if this is the involuntary nervous system, by comparison, that leaves the somatic nervous system being the voluntary nervous system, because you have voluntary control over your skeletal muscles where you do not have voluntary control over smooth or cardiac muscles or any of your glands. Autonomic nervous system is responsible for conveying homeostatic information from the central nervous system to target organs. And again, as we finished with last time, target organs, effector organs all mean the same thing. That's where we're sending the information to. The autonomic nervous system is made up of two divisions. The sympathetic, which prepares the body for physical activity when activated. It involves the expenditure of energy. Typically, the sympathetic division is referred to as what's used for fight or flight. Okay, you're going to run away from a confrontation. You're going to turn and fight during a confrontation. That's going to be the sympathetic division turning things on. Okay, it's going to allow for and involve an expenditure of energy. We can contrast that with the parasympathetic division. Parasympathetic division regulates resting or vegetative functions. Now, keep in mind, folks, we often refer to a vegetative state as someone is in a coma or something of that description. That's not 100% accurate. Vegetative simply means resting. So sitting home listening to these lectures, you are in fact vegetative, right? You're in a resting state. The parasympathetic division is going to restore and conserve body energy. Sometimes this is referred to as rest and digest. If you work at a job that is stressful, if you're, you work on an ambulance, right? When you get that call, the sympathetic division turns on. Your heart rate increases, your respiratory rate increases, everything kind of increases, amps up to get you ready for this really, really anxious issue. Parasympathetic division is what turns on after the crisis has passed and brings you back towards quote-unquote normal, back towards homeostasis. These two divisions work in opposition. For example, this is only an example, I could give you thousands of them, right? But for one example, the sympathetic division is going to speed up your heart rate in response to a stressful or anxious or physical exertion, while the parasympathetic division will slow it back down, bring it back down towards normal once that crisis, quote-unquote crisis, has passed. This brings us back to where we started, okay? We have our two divisions, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, right? There's not a whole lot going on there, right? Out brain and spinal cord and cranial and spinal nerves. Okay, good. The arrows are showing you the direction that information is going to be flowing. If we come down to the sensory or the afferent division, that information is flowing towards the central nervous system. Okay, and it's simple. That's it. It's the sensory division is bringing sensory information into the central nervous system so the central nervous system can process that information. On the other side, we have the motor or efferent division, and the arrows are coming away from the central nervous system. You'll notice our motor division is broken up into the somatic nervous system, which just deals with the skeletal muscle, and the autonomic nervous system, which deals with cardiac, smooth muscles, and glands. We have our sympathetic division. Here we say we mobilize body systems during emergency situations, fight or flight. Parasympathetic division promotes non-emergency functions, rest and digest. So your text has a version of this graphic. This exact graphic is in your lecture folder. Now, when we talk about the cells in the nervous system, you think, holy moly, with all of that, right, we'll jump back here for a second, with all of these divisions, with it coming in, going out, there's got to be hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of cells. Well, in fact, there really are only two groups of cells, and only one of those types of cells function in the nervous system, and that's the neuron. The neuron is the only kind of cell that does the work of the nervous system. It is highly, highly specialized, and we'll talk about the ramifications of that specialization in a little bit, but it's highly, highly specialized for four things. Impulse conduction, which is sending a signal, thinking, controlling muscular activity, and regulating glands, which when we think about it, that's everything we talked about when we talked about all those different divisions of the nervous system. This is the neuron. Right, at the bottom we have a diagram of it, right? We have our cell body, which we referenced earlier, talking about a group of cell bodies outside of the central nervous system being called a ganglion. And the upper photograph is very much like the type of what you saw that first week in lab, right? When we looked at the slides of a neuron. The other type of cells are the neuroglia, also called glial cells. Because your neurons are so specialized, there's precious little they can do on their own. They need a lot of help, and that's where our glial cells come into play. Their job is to serve, support, and protect the neurons because the neurons are basically unable to do it on their own. The glial cells are smaller than neurons, and there's many, many more glial cells than there are neurons because we have 6 different types of glial cells. They each have a very specific job, so there's going to be many, many glial cells servicing each one of the neurons. The types we have in the central nervous system, we have astrocytes, ependymal cells, microglia, and oligodendrocytes. In the peripheral nervous system, we have neurolemmacytes and satellite cells. So we have a total of 6 different types of glial cells, and they're divided as we see here. In the central nervous system, we're going to find astrocytes, ependymal cells, microglia, and oligodendrocytes. In the peripheral nervous system, we'll have our neurolemmacytes and our satellite cells. What we're going to do is talk our way through our different types of glial cells. We'll start with our astrocytes. These are the most abundant type of glial cell. Now, if you look at our diagram, you will see that the astrocyte is positioned between the cell body of the neuron and a blood vessel. So that astrocyte is going to work as some kind of a connection between those two systems. Astrocytes are star-shaped with many cytoplasmic extensions from the cell body, which simply means there's lots of cytoplasmic sticky outies, right? There's a lot of arms and legs coming off of that cell body, and they are star-shaped. That's why they're called astrocytes. They act as a link between blood vessels and the neurons, as we really could surmise from looking at our diagram. Their job is to regulate which substances reach neurons from the blood. You've got to realize that our neurons are very, very important to us. Without our neurons, without our ability to communicate, our body is going to cease, right? We're going to die. So we have to be really careful about what's going to reach our neurons, because if we kill off enough neurons, we will be impacted. They also act as a non-rigid support matrix. Okay, so they're connecting the neurons with blood vessels, but they also act as kind of a support system, a physical support system, right, that help the neurons stay put and do their jobs. And they are located in the central nervous system, as we said earlier. Next, we have our ependymal cells. They are epithelial cells arranged in a single layer. Many are ciliated. If we look at our diagram, what type of epithelial cell are they? Well, they're column-shaped, so I would detect that they were columnar epithelial cells and that they are ciliated. We're going to find them lining the ventricles of the brain and the central canal of the spinal cord. Central canal, we would probably be able to guess, is going to be an empty space. And if we remember from our first lecture, when we talked about ventricles, we said that they were empty spaces, all right? These are areas that both the ventricles and the central canal are areas that will allow cerebral spinal fluid to move throughout. The cilia help to set up a current, keeps that cerebral spinal fluid moving throughout the ventricles and the central canal. And it makes sense that if we're going to find it in the ventricles of the brain and the central canal of the spinal cord, that our ependymal cells are located in the central nervous system. Microglia are up next. They are small cells with few processes, which makes sense. Micro tells us that they are going to be small. They may be mobile to the site of injury, which means they're going to be able to move themselves to where an injury has occurred. We also refer to these as brain macrophages. A macrophage is a big eater, and we're going to find it in the brain, and that's what we see in this diagram. This microglial cell is eating, quote unquote, phagocytizing those bacterial cells. The job of microglia is to engulf and destroy microorganisms and cellular debris, and this is going to be accomplished by phagocytosis, as we just said. They will be located in the central nervous system. Our last of the glial cells that we're going to find in the central nervous system are the oligodendrocytes. They are somewhat star-shaped, but they have few short processes. Right, so if we look at our diagram, the kind of yellow-orangey, that's the neuron, and the blue guy that's kind of strung between two neurons, that's the oligodendrocyte. They help support neurons in the central nervous system. The extensions wrap around the axons, forming what we call the myelin sheath. We'll talk more about the myelin sheath in a bit. Right now, just know that the myelin sheath is crucial to allow a neuron to do its job as quickly and effectively as possible. So, the fact that we have these oligodendrocytes is terribly important to the overall function of the nervous system. When we look at our oligodendrocytes, and we can see it in this diagram, we have one oligodendrocyte and it's wrapping itself around parts of two different neurons. And that's very, very common in an oligodendrocyte. That's part of how they do their job as compared to the neurolemnocyte. This is a nifty diagram. All right, we have two neurons, right? And there's two oligodendrocytes, but we're going to look at the top oligodendrocyte. It has one process around the bottom, the axon of the bottom neuron, and it has two other processes around the axon of a second, the axon of a second neuron, which again is what we expect to see in the oligodendrocyte.